Welcome to the Story a Day podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Julie here from Story a Day. As you know, I run a challenge in May called Story a Day May, and it's all about getting you and me to write a lot so that you can begin to make progress. I don't ask you to do it all year round. I'll ask you to do a big binge so that you can see what's possible and where your limits are. But the thing about Story a Day May is that it helps you make progress in a kind of organic way. The more you write, the more you're going to learn. And I'm all about you teaching yourself how to write, because I don't think anyone can really teach you how to be, how to do the writing that is most you. It's a matter of turning up, trying stuff and building your skills when you perceive that you've got a gap. But that idea of making progress isn't deeply built into the May challenge. And it's hard to make progress without some kind of structure. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know I've been talking about structure for the past couple of weeks, putting some kind of structure under your writing where you're doing all the parts of the work. You're doing the imagination, you're doing the creative work of drafting, you're refining your practices and your skills, you're engaging with other people, you're celebrating your triumphs, and you're doing it all over again. Now, that all sounds like it's a lot of work, and it all sounds like it takes a lot of energy, which it does. So one of the things that I've done for the past few years is I've put together a 6-week course that I run in between challenges to help people capitalize on the things that they learn during the challenges, but push it a little forward in a more consistent, structured way. It's called the iWriter course, and I'm going to be talking about it a lot over the next week. But some of the I wanted to talk today about the ideas behind putting this course together because it grew out of everything I heard from the writers in the community, and it's been so fun to do it the last few years and to see people have success and to hear the stories that they've told me about how much progress they've made. And I think one of the reasons that this kind of course works is that it is hard to motivate yourself to write. It's hard to know what the next steps are. And it's hard to put together your own curriculum. So this iWriter course it goes through 6 weeks from, imagining, from the creative inspiration part all the way to writing 10 stories over the 6 weeks that we're together. But one of the reasons it works is because we do it as a group. This isn't a course that you can currently just download and go through at your own pace. I take you through it as a group. And I do that because the accountability is really good. It's hard to make progress alone. It takes so much energy to put a creative life together that sometimes it can be really helpful to have a curriculum to follow and other people who are going through it at the same time, so that if you have questions, you can turn up at the weekly meeting and say, okay, I didn't quite get this bit, or I struggled with this bit, or what went really well for me? And you can hear from other people things that will just spark stuff in your brain and help you to make progress. It's also hard to make progress in a vacuum because it's hard to judge how you're doing. And sometimes just having the modules to go through and the lessons to check off reminds you that you are making progress. You're turning up for your writing. You are learning new skills in a systematic way, and it's a wonderful thing. Sometimes it matters that you write, that you turn up, that you finish things. And I do find that at the end of the Story a Day challenges, people drop off a cliff a little bit. It's easy to finish things in the structure of the challenge when you know there's another prompt coming the next day. And then all of a sudden people find themselves unable to finish anything again. So this course assigns you 2 stories to write a week, and it's one short one and one longer one. And that deadline and structure really helps focus people's minds and make progress so that they do come out of it with 10 stories finished. Another reason that I like to run this course is that I think consistency is hard to achieve alone as well, because we're creative people, and creative people don't tend to love structure. Some of us do, and some of us don't. If you do, those tend to be the people I think who make progress quickly. That speed isn't everything, but I think it's easier for them to make progress quickly because they're disciplined, they sit down and do it every day. But being consistent is useful for getting over perfectionism. If you're turning up regularly for your writing, there's no need to worry if today's writing isn't good, because you know you're coming back again on that next date that's on your calendar that you've set aside for writing. Consistency is really good for making progress, because hopefully you're turning up consistently and frequently enough that the lessons you learned in your last writing session are still in your mind. The story points that you want to continue are still in your mind. You still know who your characters are. If you don't turn up consistently, there's an awful lot of prep work that has to happen before you can get to the actual writing, the actual creative part every time. Now, I will admit that consistency is not everyone's favourite word, and it can be bad. Again, I think if you're trying to be consistent in a vacuum, it just takes a lot of energy. If you are trying to write alone, it's hard to see where you're making progress. But if consistency or on any other kind of word is holding you back from making progress in your writing, I'm going to invite you to reframe that word in your head. So consistency may be boring, but boring isn't necessarily bad. Is it boring if your boss pays you consistently? It may not be as exciting as wondering if the check's going to land in your bank account this Friday, but knowing it's going to be there consistently is a good kind of boring, right? We've all had that friend or boyfriend or girlfriend who was exciting, but life was chaotic when they're in your life. Having someone in your life, a friend who is consistent, is, over the long term, not quite as exciting, but definitely not a bad thing. So I would invite you to think about consistency in your writing life not as something that will be boring, but as something that will give you the ability to get to the fun bits faster. Traveling without making plans is definitely exciting, but traveling with a solid plan and, buffers on the time, getting to the airport early, that kind of thing, is maybe not as exciting, but it lets you get to your destination. You don't end up spending a night in an unknown city as you wait for a connection because you missed your first flight. It may be not quite as exciting, but there are certain types of excitement that aren't productive. One more story about the benefits of consistency. I may have talked about this before, but one of my friends was getting married a few years ago, and I decided that I was going to knit her this vast blanket. It was so vast it needed its own name and its own blog. It was called Wool. The pattern was called Wheaton, so that the blanket decided it was called Wool Wheaton, and I had to keep myself going at first by blogging about it, and then as the deadline approached for the wedding date, I realised that just hoping it was going to get done wasn't enough, and I needed to be more consistent about putting stitches on that thing, otherwise it wasn't going to get done. So I broke out my calculator and I figured out that I had to knit 4 rows a day to get it done by a date that was early enough that I could wash the massive thing, stretch it out and dry the massive thing, and then get it in my case in time to get to California. So every day I didn't have to have the emotional discussion with myself about, am I going to knit today? How much am I going to knit today? Oh, I've got hundreds of rows still to go of this massive queen-sized bed-shaped-sized thing. And, looking at it was really intimidating, but looking at it and knowing I only had to do 4 rows today was less intimidating. Being consistent and having a reasonable goal was so much better than the excitement I would have had I left it to the last minute and had to stay up for 4 days on end and give myself RSI trying to finish this thing. And it turned out that it all went well in the end. All this to say, if you struggle to get as much writing done as you would like to get done, if you feel like you're not making progress, if you feel like you could use some consistency and maybe a curriculum, all of that is okay. Sometimes we need other people. I mean, we're social creatures. It's how we evolved. It's no matter where you are on the introvert scale, humanity evolved to be social creatures. I don't always want to hang out with other people. I'm an introvert like most of you. But when I get up in the morning and I get to go to the Superstars, Story Day Superstars writing sprints, I'm not always in the mood. And then I get there and I get to hang out with other writers, and just seeing their faces sometimes is all it takes to change the chemistry in my brain and, make my day start to go better. So yes, we are social creatures. If you need accountability, if you need someone else to do some of the work and give you a curriculum for the next 6 weeks so that you can come out with 10 stories written where you wouldn't have before, that's okay. We don't have to do this all ourselves. There's no shame in doing things collaboratively. It's much healthier to acknowledge that you need something and then go and find it than to waste time wishing that you were otherwise. There are people out there who can make promises to themselves and follow through, and that's all fine. There are people out there who can say no to the third cookie. If you know that you're not one of those people, trying to change yourself is a recipe for misery. Finding the thing you need or not having cookies in the house might be what you need to do, and it doesn't make you any less good a person than the person who's different from you. Know yourself, figure out what you need, get what you need when you need it, and just go from there. The world needs your stories. If you want to join my iWriter course and get some consistent writing under you during the next 6 weeks, you can do that. You can come over to storyaday.org/iWriter if that's right for you. If you're listening to this later and the iWriter course isn't running just now, don't worry, it'll be back. And there are other ways to get support at Story a Day, not least in September when the challenge will be back. Anyway, that's what I have for you this week. Consistency is good. A little bit of boring isn't necessarily a bad thing. And if you want to make progress, you probably want to be writing consistently. You probably want to be doing it with some kind of interaction with other writers. And you need to find a way to level up your skills and not just be writing in a vacuum, because you're not writing in a vacuum, you're writing for readers. And all of us are writing from our experiences and for the reader who is in need of hearing what we have to say. That's what I have for you this week. Stick around. There will be a writing prompt coming up in a minute or so. And I hope you have a great creative week. Keep writing. Hi, it's Julie. Are you frustrated with trying to do this writing thing alone and without a plan? The iWriter course is back to give you a great big kickstart in your writing practice. It's a course for people who are fed up of dabbling and who want to make some progress so that they feel confident saying, I am a writer. Come and find out how it feels to write and complete multiple short stories in the company of others who are on the same journey. The iWriter course is based in 10 years of writing short stories myself and working with other writers, pulling together all the best practices and building a model you can follow. It's worked for a lot of writers already, but I bet you have questions about whether it would work for you. So I've put together a page that tells you all about the iWriter course. It's at storyaday.org/iWriter. Don't wait, let's write now, not someday. And I'm back with the writing prompt for this week. Last week I invited you to write a story about somebody who remembered the same incident differently, and their perception was to be changed by the person they've become and the people they're hanging out with and the way that we change during life. So I've been reading a lot about psychology and how we construct our sense of self. So that was last week's prompt. This week, I want you to think about two characters and how they interact with each other. And I want you to limit your story to two characters so that we don't get complications. They can refer to other characters, but no other characters get to walk into the story. So they can talk about people who are off screen, but they can't actually turn up. These two characters, I want you to work on creating conflict between these two characters based on the fact that we can't even construct ourselves in a truthful way. Everything that we do has a subtext, has motivation based in our biases on how we want to be seen. We remember things so that we seem more favourable in our own memories. So obviously when we talk to other people and when we speak to other people, none of that's happening without us lying to ourselves, basically. Not lying, but we're creating a fiction of how we want to be seen. We're trying to persuade people. So in this story, nothing overt, nothing too heavy-handed, but I just want you to have a story between two people where something happens. These two people are probably wanting different things. It's, something is going to happen. There's an outcome in the balance. Each of them probably wants a different thing, or maybe they want the same thing but for different reasons. And I want you to concentrate on the potential misunderstanding between the two characters based on what one character thinks the other person means, and thinks, what one character believes the other character is saying. If you've ever been in a relationship, a really close relationship, you will know that it's entirely possible for you to say a thing one way and mean it one way, and for someone to hear something completely different. In the written word, we can't easily show the stresses on syllables. For example, I said to one of my kids the other day, I sent a text and I said, "You should do this." In my head, I had written it as "you should do this." In their mind, they heard "you should do this." Or no, they heard "you should do this." They heard it as very sort of passive aggressive. And it was, so when we're writing, you can put italics in and things like that. But there's always going to be that element of miscommunication between people because our perception is so tied up with our identity. So, write a story, two characters, something is going to change. Each of the characters has a vested interest in this, and have them communicate, have them talking to each other and kind of misunderstanding each other's motivations. It can be subtle, it can be dramatic, it can be life and death stakes, it can be whether to get the apple pie or the cream puff. There's going to be tension inherently built into your story if you have two characters coming at something from different angles. And bear in mind that idea that we want to present ourselves in a certain way, both to the outside world and to ourselves, so that we can live with ourselves. So that can be fodder for great interaction between characters. Write the story, come over to the blog, tell me what you did, and as always, have a great creative week and keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at storyaday.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week and of course, keep writing.